Hi there, it's Nichol Magouirk for Simon Says Stamp, and this is the blog hop featuring the May 2013 card kit. And this is the card I've created to share with you today, and it uses the 6x6 pattern papers from the kit, the vellum, lots of stamps, as well as I incorporated one of the exclusive Simon Says Stamps dies, that wreath you see there, from the collection at Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to show you how I created my card. The first thing I did was take some of the smooth white cardstock included in the kit, and I'm using the Memento Tuxedo Black ink to stamp the smaller sized flower image on my cardstock. Now you can see that second one that I stamped wasn't a very good image, and I'm just stamping several of them. I like to stamp a couple more than what I actually need, because a lot of times either I make a mistake or whatever, and this way I have a whole bunch already ready to go. I'm also going to stamp several of these little leaves here, also included in the May stamp set. So once I have all of these stamped out, I am going to begin coloring them with some Copics. Now I am using more than one floral because I'm going to be cutting pieces of this apart and layering them for a dimensional flower. Now this color here that I'm using was really light, and I ended up not using it in some of the later florals just because I ended up covering up too much of it. So I had thought I was going to go a bit lighter with my floral. So even though you see it here, I didn't really use it other than to kind of create my base color, I guess I would say. I covered it completely up. So I didn't include it in the colors that I have listed on my blog post today that shows all of the colors that I'm using. So I'm just kind of quickly go through this, and I'm going to speed through it just a little bit so that it's not quite so long and boring to watch me color. So I'm simply going to build upon that base color, and I'm just adding little flecks of color, kind of using a feathering technique used with the Copics, just to add and build up the color on these flowers for a more realistic look. And I really played around with the colors I used. I wasn't exactly sure what colors would look the best. I was looking for yellows and browns, orangish kind of yellows, I guess I would say, that would go well with the pattern papers in the kit. So some worked better than others, and that color I just used, I ended up not using because I think it made it just a little too brown. So in additional colored flowers, I didn't use that particular color. I'm going to kind of color over that a little bit to get rid of it because I really didn't like it. It had a little too much green in it or something, I think. So this particular flower ended up being the base flower for my dimensional flower there on my card, and so I could cover up most of this one, since I didn't really like it quite as much as some of the others. And you can go over it as many times as you want to get the color and the, saturation of color that you want and all the shading and things like that. Now I did die cut my wreath, and I guess I missed recording that when I actually did it. I apologize, but I just cut it out of the white cardstock, and I should say I also colored the leaves with 3 colors of green. They're listed on my blog post, and cut all of the pieces out. Now all I'm doing is adding some distress ink. This is the crushed olive, using the foam blending tool from Ranger, and I cut it out of the white cardstock. This is an exclusive die for Simon Says Stamp, and then this is the forest moss, I think is what color it is, and I'm just going to build that up just a little bit. I'm not going to go all the way around it. I just want to add a little touch of color so it has a more realistic look and is not just one tone or color. So I'm just kind of adding it here and there. Not going to completely add that, but it just really, I think it looks a little bit nicer with a couple of colors of ink. Once I have that done, I'll set that aside for a second. And I'm going to grab my flowers and just kind of look and see if that's looking like I want it to look. Now, in the finished card, I did decide to take an additional flower from the kit, stamp it a couple times, and then I colored it just like I colored previously in the video here. So even though I didn't share that step, I did it exactly the same way. I had originally thought that I would use a bunch of this size flower, but once I got it laid out here, I realized I really didn't want to use all the same. It just didn't look good. So I ended up going with the smaller, kind of closed looking rose instead of the more open one that you see here. Now I'm going to take this Spellbinders oval, and I am going to die cut that from one of the 6x6 papers included in the kit. One of them that's more of a solid background, I would say. It has a very subtle pattern, but it isn't really, it doesn't distract, I guess I'm saying. This is the piece where I'm going to stamp my greeting. Now I chose this particular oval because it fits pretty well behind this exclusive Simon Says stamp wreath, oval wreath die. You can see it might have a little bit of overhang, but I think once I get all of my other elements and pieces placed on there, you won't really notice that. I really just wanted a different color of cardstock behind the wreath than what I was using as the base of my card. I'm also going to take this dark gray included in the kit, and I'm going to cut my wreath out again from this paper to create kind of a shadow. This is something I do a lot when I'm using the Silhouette die cutting machine and creating die cuts for my scrapbook pages and cards when using that die cutting tool. And I like to do it with a manual die cutter as well. Especially in this instance, I really think that the shadow will help make that wreath appear more dimensional on my card, as well as help cover up that oval behind it. You can see I laid a greeting stamp out there. That's the greeting I'm going to be using in the center of my card. And I've also die cut this banner using a My Favorite Things die from one of the cardstocks in the May kit. And I'm using this banner stamp from the May kit. And I'm going to stamp first the bottom portion. Most of this is going to be hidden back behind some other elements on my card. So the fact that it didn't line up perfectly and you see that little seam there is okay. I'm just looking for the length of the banner as well as adding the texture with the stamp. And I'll hide that seam back behind the wreath so you won't even see that part. Now I went ahead and added some adhesive to my vellum because that also is going to be hidden. And I'm just adding it in the middle because I'm going to take these pieces, I've already cut all of this down, all of the papers from the kit, and I'm going to sew around the edges. So there you can see I sewed that, and then I adhered all of my pattern paper and vellum pieces to my card. I did this because I do not want the machine stitching to show on the inside of the card. I like the inside of my cards to be nice and smooth. So I layered my pattern papers, I sewed around the vellum, and then I adhered all of that to my card base. And here you can see that banner that I'm adhering to my card. Such a cute and fun little stamp, and it works perfectly with that My Favorite Things die set, excuse me, and that die is one of my very favorites, or the dies in that. I've used all of them, all the different sizes, and so it's really fun that this particular size works well with the stamp in this month's or May's stamp or card kit. I'm going to just use the tiny attacher to attach that at the top of my card, and then I'm going to layer my oval. Now, one thing that I would like to mention that I didn't do, but I really wish I had, is stamp the greeting before I place this on my card. It did cause me a little bit of trouble when stamping my greeting, and I had to kind of line it back up and do it again, as you'll see in a second. So for future reference and to help you guys out, I would stamp that before I adhere it to my card. Those different layers, the banner and things underneath it, really caused it to not stamp quite as well as I would have liked it to. But I didn't want to rip up my card, so it wasn't terrible, so I went ahead and left it. I really love this greeting. I love the mix of the typography on this, the script and things. So there you see how it didn't stamp all that great. I was so irritated with myself. I know better. So I just lined that up really carefully. I apologize, my head got in the way, and stamped that again. So you can see that for the most part, that's fine. It wasn't quite as clean as I would have liked it. So next, I'm going to go ahead and take the Zig glue pen and add some glue to my wreath shadow and my wreath and glue those in place right there over that oval die. You can kind of stretch it out just a tiny bit and it really fits that Spellbinders die perfectly. This glue pen is a great way to add adhesive to your small die cuts. It just writes that, draws that adhesive right where you need it to, and it's just much easier than any other glue that I've found. I've used spray adhesive and stuff in the past, but it tends to be messy. You have to have a box or something, or spray it outside and all these different things. And so I found that lately I'm really enjoying using the Zig glue pens to adhere any of my delicate type die cuts. So I'm just layering these very carefully. I'm slightly offsetting it. Sorry, my head is in the way again. And then I'll glue that right in place on my card. So there is my wreath. Just kind of careful. You can see I kind of stretched that out to fit the oval underneath it, and it works perfectly. Next, I am going to take the pieces of my large floral or rose here, and I already adhered all of those with the layered pieces using some foam adhesive, and these are those smaller floral that I stamped a couple of these and colored them just the same and cut them out. I just cut the stem from this because I don't need it for this particular card. Makes the florals very versatile. I'm just going to tuck those in just to see if I like how that looks before I go ahead and adhere them. I'm using a combination of some glue dots and foam adhesive for these smaller flowers because I want them to be just a tad bit dimensional and not lay really, really flat against the card. I'm going to tuck that back in there, glue it in place, and I really fiddled with that just a little bit. Make sure I get it right where I want it. I'm going to adhere the other small floral exactly the same way using a glue dot and some foam adhesive, and then tuck that kind of above and underneath a little portion of the wreath and the larger floral. Gives it a more realistic look. Then I'll glue the large floral in place with a glue dot, and I'm going to tuck the leaves in and around. I ended up using 3 leaves. I like odd numbers when I'm adding embellishments and things to my projects. And we'll tuck in a couple of those on this side and one above. The last thing I'm going to do for my card is I thought it needed just a little bit of bling. So I took a Copic glitter marker, the gold color, and I colored all over the florals just to add a little sparkle. Oh, and I also stamped one of the other greetings inside, the Happy Mother's Day, to finish off the card really nicely. And I'm going to add some gemstones here and there along the wreath and around it, and the card is finished. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the May 2013 card kit. Thanks for watching.